We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
From your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine Podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis, James Fegan, and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to the Sox Machine Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, and it's Thursday night, March 7, 2024, as we bring you a new episode. The Chicago White Sox Cactus League record is not good. The White Sox are 4-10, which isn't the worst record in the league, but naturally, they do have the worst Cactus League run differential at -35. What does that mean for the regular season? Not a damn thing. Hopefully, while the overall play is not encouraging, Eloy Jimenez's swing has been, as he continues to rake. Also, Nicky Lopez is having a strong spring so far. We'll rave about those two position players and also chat about an upcoming steak dinner bet that I need some help setting the line on. But first, not to be too big of a downer, but Michael Kopech struggled a bit in his second appearance against the Los Angeles Dodgers. After that appearance, White Sox manager Pedro Grifol said that he's not committing Kopech into the starting rotation just yet. Okay, that's interesting, so let's chat. Joining me is the Sox Machine beat reporter James Fegan and the managing editor Jim Margulis. James and Jim, hello, or should I say, hey now. How would you feel, Jim, if I spent the entire Sox Machine budget on purchasing the rights to T.I.'s Bring 'Em Out so we could play that song as our new podcast intro in homage to new White Sox play-by-play broadcaster John Schriffen?
I would not be for it. Hey now, I wonder if he's going to every week try on a different catchphrase. I think that'd be a pretty good bit, actually, given how infrequent his appearances are right now. Every week be a slightly different guy just to keep people on their toes. I linked to the Ray Romano Sports Center bits, or alluded to it. I didn't actually link to it. Get out the checkbook and pay grandma for the rub down, sweet sassy molassy, etc. Yeah, every single week, just a different wrinkle that makes people say, what the hell is he doing? Then come opening day, he's perfectly fine and straightforward and, leaning on Steve Stone, etc. and being what Mike Monaco was last year. I think it would be a fun bit.
It would be a fun bit. James, were you a big T.I. fan back in college?
I mean, I was in college and T.I. was popular, so I heard it a lot and listened to plenty. I don't think I have any album cuts of T.I.'s that I'm really into, or I have big theories about what his best era was. But I had T.I. songs on my iPod back in 05. I'm sure I played something of the era when the White Sox won the World Series, and I had to watch it alone in my section lounge because all my classmates were watching Family Guy.
Oh, that sounds fun. Yeah, Bring 'Em Out by T.I. is over 20 years old for those elder millennials like we are, if you want to feel a little bit older about your life. Man. That used to be the song that UW Oshkosh would come out to for all of its athletics. Was Bring 'Em Out. So I appreciate it. Yeah, UW Oshkosh. Good old UW Oshkosh. Okay, so that's a no then. I will not be purchasing the rights to T.I.'s Bring 'Em Out as the new Sox Machine podcast intro. I'm a little disappointed in that.
Yeah, it would cost a couple of James road trips at least.
Let's see how we feel in August.
You sure, James, you don't want to go to Houston for that series? Are you sure? Should be a close one. Anyways, it could be. We'll see.
They split last year and they lost 101 games. Why not?
Yeah, that was the beginning of the season. Yeah, everything was looking up back then. Anyways, joking aside, speaking of being disappointing, Michael Kopech a bit shaky in his second start. And James, it wasn't good from the get-go. His first 10 pitches, 8 of them were balls. He was all over the zone. And now Pedro Grifol, after that appearance, even though Kopech did settle down and was able to get into the third inning, but not out of the third inning, Pedro Grifol telling reporters he's not confirming a starting spot for Michael Kopech in the rotation. Why do you think that is?
One is because like enhancing the idea that there's an open competition camp is like one of his like biggest priorities. And it's like talking up his guys where he tends to like maybe overstate it to a degree. Any opportunity he can say that it's an open competition, that nothing is given, and that there's a real fight for spots and there's a real scratch and claw atmosphere in camp, I think he'll kind of latch onto it. So I think there's probably maybe a little bit of that going into it. But I think if Nick Nastrini had an outing like that, where like he's erratic at first and then he reins it in, and then you see the stuff and you're like, oh, all right, that we'll see how that works. We saw what he's still working on, and we saw why he'll be good. I think it would be a different reaction. But with Kopech, this organization has seen him kind of be this, going on like 3 full seasons in the rotation now. Like obviously there's been a lot of reasons it's been compromised, but physically, and why there's been issues with command, or why it's been hard to be consistent for him mechanically. But I think there's probably a lot more. We've done our part chasing this, and it's looking more like a reliever perspective, both with this group and also just like, he's had a kind of ample rope to pursue this. And, with his last 2 years of control, maybe it's kind of in a Ronaldo Lopez situation of really just maybe start trying to figure out where he works best rather than chasing the ceiling over and over. Even a year like this, I think his career is just getting to a point where you kind of need to see something more, or make a call about, this is the consistency we have to work with. How do we best utilize? And I think that'd probably be a pretty good reliever.
Let me follow up on that. How much rope do you think Kopech has then for the remaining of this spring training to demonstrate that he's still a starting pitcher and he should be part of that starting 5 to start the season?
I don't think they're heading towards a cliff in a big way, because they can, they already have such a large group they're stretching out. There's already like, roles they can flex him out to, even if he's throwing 3-4 innings. I don't think there's really big downside to continue to stretch him out. It's not like they have, this wealth of starting options and they need to like start solidifying what the rotation is in some way. So I think he can get 3-4 starts or to kind of get it right. And I really think like, even if things don't pick up that much, where you're still seeing like some erratic command, like I think it's probably more likely than not he starts the year in the rotation. I just don't think that the rope is, come hell or high water, he's going to get 6 months of starts if we can give it to him healthy. I think they're past that point with him.
The reason I bring these questions up, Jim, because when I'm looking at the projected opening day roster right now, and even before spring training started, when I was doing my projected 26-man rosters, following the White Sox offseason activity, a lot of people asked me, why do you have Michael Kopech in the bullpen? Because I felt like that was where he was destined, especially if he could not build up any type of consistency as he got deeper into his starts. I don't have that big of confidence that Kopech can maintain over 5 innings. And after the first start, I was hopeful that I was wrong. But in this next start, I mean, it is the Dodgers. The Dodgers have a very good lineup. But now I'm kind of iffy on what Kopech's status is with the White Sox. How are you feeling about Michael Kopech after his latest outing against the Dodgers?
It feels like were there a wealth of better options, their decision would be made already. But when you look at what the rotation is, without Kopech, you'd have Cease, you have Fetty, Flexen, Soroka, presumably assuming that he has a smooth spring training. And then what do you have? Like you have Jared Schuster, maybe you have Tuki Toussaint, who's
been worse than Kopech, right?
Oh no, I confused his whip for his ERA. His whip is 9.
9?
Yes. 7 hits, 8 walks over 1 2/3 innings. It's a 9 whip. 59.4 ERA. So I just kind of glanced at his numbers and thought, 9 ERA, that's better than I thought. He must have think, nope. It's, yeah. So that's the competition right now, unless they do get bold about like Nastrini or something like that, breaking camp opening day, or like Garrett Crochet, depending on like, do they want to make him like maybe a starter in terms of like, oh, you're going to be an opener, or like one time through the lineup, 2 or 3 innings, then we'll throw Tanner Banks in there, or somebody who can, carry the next few innings, and we'll figure it out as we go along. But without like Touki Toussaint, who would probably be the presumable 6th starter going into the season if everybody looked fully functional, that until somebody's really forcing him out, there's no reason to create an emergency where there isn't one, because I think there are going to be plenty of emergencies elsewhere, like figuring out the rest of the bullpen, which is looking a little bit iffy with Brebbia not throwing yet and Lambert out, like a lot of open spots there, and not a whole lot of guys, knocking down the door for those various vacancies. So I think Kopech is probably more of a back burner thing, to where like, yeah, we know it's probably going to be ugly, but at least he knows what he's doing there, or knows what he's supposed to be doing. We can manage it. And then like come May 1st, we'll see how the rest of our roster is and see if we're equipped to make like a change for good, rather than like take him out and put him back in and take him out and move him back and forth and make a mess of it.
Well, let me follow up back with you, Jim. Like the picture that you're painting right now, and I think we would all agree, at least on opening day, the entire pitching staff is going to be shaky. And we've been trying to buy into the hype and be optimistic about the White Sox defense. But you've been writing about this on Sox Machine. It doesn't matter how good the defense is if the walks continue to pile up like last year. And the fact that you would need every diving stop from Nicky Lopez, which we'll talk about later in this podcast, to prevent runs because the pitcher walked the first 2 guys in the inning. Like, how does this fast approach, how does this defensive first approach works if the pitching is on this shaky ground?
It works. I mean, like, I can envision some situations to where like a well-executed run relay cuts down a runner at the plate and limits the Twins to 3 runs. That's kind of how it feels like. Yeah. This might work. Just like, oh, that was a nice play. Or like a 1 throw rundown, the exchange between the guy chasing down the runner, throwing to the fielder, occupying the base, is like crisply executed, terrific. And that's what it takes to get out of innings. Like, it does help, because we've seen what it looks like when the pitching staff can't find the strike zone and they don't have defense, which is just some, interminable innings. So that's why, like, it will make a difference. It just won't feel like one. I think that's the problem. Like, you're putting a lot of stress on the defense to where, like, as we saw in one of the games recently, I think it was 2 days ago, with Max Stassi bouncing a throw past Paul DeJong on a stolen base attempt, and then turns into effectively a double steal. And that you can make fun of it and say like, well, I guess the fast approach isn't working. It's just like, no, it's just a normal defensive lapse that occasionally happens on a bang bang play. But because you've built your entire approach around not making mistakes, every mistake is going to be something that just can't be absorbed. You talked about Chris Getz's offseason grading, and I gave him a D just because there weren't any difference makers. You're not feeling like there's a whole lot of upside in this approach. You're just feeling he's trying to get it over with as quickly as possible. And, he's kind of dealing Pedro Grifol a bad hand, which is maybe something he doesn't really, care about if he has a manager in mind, like down the road. Like, it might be collateral damage in the whole thing, but it does stand a very real chance of like, this whole improved defense just not making a difference, or maybe games that would be like 13-1 are now 8-1 instead. Like, that's kind of how it feels like if the pitching staff collapses the way that it could with just, either a Dylan Cease trade or a couple of like very targeted injuries.
If they trade Dylan Cease now, I can't imagine what this rotation is going to look like on opening day. I could see the sports books crashing the at least preseason win-loss total for the White Sox, which some books have 63.5 wins. I've seen one sports book circa in Illinois now down to 62.5 wins for the White Sox. James, you wrote about the White Sox and Mike Soroka trying to rediscover or rebuild a Mike Soroka. As Jim mentioned, and what is the possible starting rotation right now, how reliable, like, should we write Mike Soroka's name in pen in the starting rotation on opening day, or is it still in pencil? Like, how can the White Sox count on him to be ready at the end of March?
From a health perspective, I think they emphasize that he's fine. That I think Ethan Katz like ran off like kind of all the physical differences with him, and there was a little bit of panic. Like, so is he okay? And he's healthy enough where I think, and especially with his experience starting and he says he's got the stamina and the health for it. I think he's probably as ready or as positioned to be in the starting rotation as anyone in camp. Like, obviously a tier below like guys like Cease and Fetty, but I'd put him above Kopech in odds of being in the rotation, where I think it's, strongly more likely than not some sort of setback would have to occur. I think him coming over here and this conversation he's talked to the team and how he's talked about it, it's came with the understanding like, we're going to give this a go and see how it looks. And, we're going to give you some things to work on. We're going to try to see how it works out of your new release point and give a try to rotation. I think he has probably a bit more. I wouldn't say like it's a long-term commitment to struggle, because obviously he's a pending free agent. And if it's just like, swimming upstream for 2 months, I don't think he has any big stake in the organization where they have to stick to it. But I think kind of the season and acquiring him is about, can we make this work? Can we turn this into a usable starter? And then what does that mean that we've done it is something to revisit again at the deadline or revisit again at the end of the year, depending on how it goes. So I would think you could probably lean in pen. Maybe you get in trouble. I think whenever I assume anything is going to be right, or I don't need to proofread my articles, that's what a huge error is. But I'd feel pretty confident about him in there. It's just a matter of effectiveness rather than health or organizational faith being the thing to watch with him.
With Kopech, again, it's about the wildness. So far in 4 2/3 innings in spring training, he's only allowed 2 hits, but he's hit 2 batters and he's walked 4. So these are kind of self-destructive tendencies that Kopech has showed, and most of that damage came against the Dodgers in his last appearance. We'll see. Like, if Kopech's not in the starting rotation, are we talking about Jonathan Cannon being the 5th starter in opening day? Jake Woodford? Like, that's kind of where it's my head right now, Jim. Like, I know you were trying your best to come up with the starting 5. Like, if it's not Kopech, who is it? It won't be Touki Toussaint. I mean, a 9 whip, no way. I'm going to be kind of shocked if Toussaint even makes the team if he's not cut before spring training, if he doesn't start pitching better. And I liked what he provided to the White Sox at the end of last year. So that's a bit disappointing. But yeah, any other names we should be watching carefully to see if they could challenge Kopech for this spot in the rotation if the White Sox are not confident in Kopech taking one of those spots?
I think it would be, when you look at the 40-man, it would be Toussaint, it would be Schuster. He's there, and like he has some experience to where they're not throwing him in the deep end and being like, hey, Jonathan Cannon, I know that we didn't have any plans for you to be in the big leagues and we had like a roadmap for you, but now we're ditching that because we're in trouble for what looked like a 100-loss season anyway. Like I don't see them screwing up or altering their minor league plans for him or Nastrini, Eater, anybody like that. So I think it would be Schuster first because he's been there and because like perhaps they don't, it was in a 5-for-1 deal. So maybe it's hard to know when you have a 5-for-1 trade, like how much they're individually invested in any one player, or if it's just like a grab bag of guys they could use and throw out there and see who sticks. So I think Schuster, like based on what I've seen so far, would kind of fall in that group of just, we'll see how he does. No big deal if it doesn't work out. It buys us 3 weeks until we have to go to the next option, whether that gets into the, you mentioned, the Woodford, the Chad Kuhl level, if anybody's there performing yet. Nobody has stood out yet among those non-roster invitee pitchers, but like a couple weeks, maybe some development happens to where like, they're kind of fodder here to, put in the rotation. They don't mind a few more weeks of service time. If they end up with an 80 ERA and being DFA'd by the end of it, like it's it's an experience they might have already encountered already or are prepared for, living the NRI lifestyle. So that's kind of where I think they would go. None of it's pretty, but I think they probably would prioritize protecting prospect development over anything else.
Really need Michael Kopech to have some strong outings here, because I'm not feeling very confident about this White Sox starting rotation opening day after this discussion, guys. Because
I would say, like, the way people are talking about Nastrini, if he's not setting himself up for like actual breaking camp, he's putting himself in that hallowed
six starter
prospect
spot,
ready to when they have a gap in the rotation midseason. Hopefully Sean Burke like recovers from injury to where we don't have to name it the Sean Burke slot, but we can talk about his career independently. But it makes me think of the position Sean Burke was supposed to be in last season, where he was the prospect who would take a gap in the rotation if it came up.
Is he doing anything, Sean Burke? He's
not in Major League camp, so that puts a little mystery around his. That makes it seem like they're not expecting him to take a job in the near future, not too distant future.
Again, Michael Kopech, let's get back on track, man. Because I don't have a lot of confidence in Chris Flexen or Mike Soroka. So come on, Michael, you can do this. Let's get back on track. We're going to take a quick moment for a word from our sponsors, but when we come back after the break, we'll talk about a couple White Sox position players that are performing well and help me set a steak dinner bet next on the Sox Machine podcast.
We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
With threats to our nation waiting around every corner, adaptability is more important than ever. When conditions change without notice, quick strategic thinking is crucial. And with obstacles consistently impending, determination is essential in overcoming them. It's this willingness, decisiveness, and resilience that sets Marines apart. With our fighting spirit, we don't just fight battles, we win them. Marines are the constant our nation counts on to fight the unknown. And through adaptable problem solving, we do just that. Learn more at Marines.com.
Welcome back to the Sox Machine podcast. Eloy Jimenez, every time we talk about him and his spring training performance, it continues to get better. I've been watching college baseball, and some of these top sluggers for the upcoming draft have insane batting averages. And here's Eloy in spring training, and he's 13 for 25 as we record this episode. He finally hit his home run. First home run of spring against the Dodgers, a monster home run. He's got 9 RBIs this spring. He's only struck out twice. Now he's only walked once, but he's not whiffing a whole lot. It's a 520 batting average, a 720 slugging. It's easy to get hyped right now, Jim, about Eloy, and you wrote about this on SoxMachine.com for those that got an opportunity to read it. If not, it seems to be the way that he's placing his hands right now. This just looks like a different Eloy that we've seen the last couple of years, a more confident, a more authoritative swing, I should say, and he's not hitting the ball on the ground as often, which is something I've been begging for the last 3 years. He looks really good.
He does. I just wish when it came to the hand positioning and like his elbows or his arms are a little bit further out too. So it seems like he is starting like his swing from a different spot upper body wise. I want to know about like his, just the health of his lower body, like the way he's moving, the way he's running down first base line, the way he's taking extra bases. He jumped over a grounder to screen Gavin Lux in a way that was especially agile for him. And we've seen it with like Yoan Makata and Tim Anderson. Like when they don't have their lower bodies, their swings are entirely different. Their ability to drive the ball, to lift the ball to the pole field is markedly different or diminished. Anderson, when he doesn't have his legs, he's like just poking the ball to right field. Whereas when he does have his lower body engaged, like he's able to rip the ball, into the White Sox bullpen and left field on mistakes. So you can't discount like how important just having 100% legs is. So that's why, I think it's both when it comes to like his different stance and also just being 100%. And you hope that it's a result of him, taking conditioning really seriously, the way like the White Sox said he intended to, because I think his career hasn't been what he wanted it to be. And either way, like I imagine it's a combination of both, but it's been really impressive so far.
Yeah, and James, to Jim's point about Eloy's overall health, is it that simple for him just to be 100% healthy, or have you heard about some of the adjustments did he do this on his own about his hand placement, or did the new White Sox hitting coaching regime that they brought in after the offseason have been working with him on this?
I mean, on the one hand, like he did it on his own in the sense like he goes back and he works with his independent guy, but like lifting the ball, that there needs to be adjustment, that there needs to be something in terms to get him out in front more often was like the take home, off-season development plan or performance plan for him. He applied it on his own, or he worked out his thing with his own instructor back home. But I think just getting back here is more a continuation of where he's been. But it's kind of like a take home and bake pizza type of situation for him, where the menu and the ingredients were laid out for him, and then he went home and I don't know. He looks great, so maybe not eat a ton of pizza, but it seems like it's kind of a collaborative thing of here's what we need you to do, and this is the product of what he's in, which looks great so far. Obviously, he's might have seen more fastballs in spring training that he'll see in April, but this is what you want in terms of he's already getting national reporters to tweet about him as a trade candidate. So mission accomplished from March 7th at this point.
Yeah, let me follow up with that, James, to you about John Rossi of MLB Network tweeting that maybe Eloy will be enhancing his trade value. We heard in Nashville from other people representing teams that every team's got an Eloy Jimenez, someone that they could dream on, that they think can hit 30 homers, but for XYZ reason, they never get to that type of power. If Eloy performs well in the first half, are we going to have similar conversations come June and July like we're going to have with Dylan Cease about how a team could trade for Eloy knowing that his contract comes with the buyout next year and it is a club option?
I don't think seeing Eloy Jimenez like hit the crap out of the ball for like 2 weeks like changes anybody's report on him for spring training. I do think once the season starts and you're in a competitive race and like, all right, here's a bat that's like clearly locked in and healthy right now, I think that has a different value than getting someone to buy in and trade real assets over the offseason when they probably think they can develop this sort of production internally or for less, or not pay both a prospect premium and a decently high salary, well, not an irrelevant salary at the same time. I just think the immediacy and having him be really operational, looking good mid-season means a lot more than just like the concept of Eloy Jimenez, which is obviously degraded in the league-wide view over the years, but can't really be reversed by just looking good in spring. Like we know Eloy Jimenez has a ton of talent. We know he can go off for a couple of weeks. We certainly know he can hit minor league pitching, which is at least a decent variety of what he's gotten so far. So it's encouraging. I don't think it's even remotely game changing at the state, but I think anytime you have a bat that's working, it's movable at the deadline or the right situation. It might be hard for 3 months of control to get something that really feels like the level of investment you put in Eloy Jimenez. I don't think that sort of return is coming, but I think definitely it's something. I think the White Sox of all teams will prove how valuable hitters are this season. So I think if Eloy's cooking, there'll be a market.
Yeah, the home run to fly ball rate is an important metric for Eloy. In his career, it's 22.7%, which is good. So that means over 22% of the fly balls that Eloy Jimenez hits go for home runs. And when you look at Guarantee Rate Field, that's a very important metric. It's just that in his rookie year, when he hit over 30 homers, it was 27%. In the shortened 2020 season, which Eloy was well on pace to hit more than 30 homers again, it was 31%, and it has dropped in 2021, 2022, and 2023. It was over 21% in 2021 and 2022. It was 16% in 2023, paired with a 53% ground ball rate. So far in spring training, that ground ball rate for Eloy is just 35%, Jim. And I know we've been harping on this particular metric, but I'm really hopeful, Jim. I'm hopeful that this is the magic cure on the hand placement for Eloy, because if he can have a sub 40% ground ball rate, I may have sold almost all the stock that I had in Eloy Jimenez after last year, because I was just aggravated and frustrated with the ground balls. But if he has a sub 40% ground ball rate and he keeps his home run fly ball career rates at, again, the monster we've been dreaming about ever since the White Sox acquired him for the Chicago Cubs may come to fruition at age 27.
It's also better for his health because when he hits the ball in the air, he doesn't have to run.
Yeah, there you go.
Or at least he doesn't have to sprint down the line 100%. Like he can, head down the line at 75%, depending on, what the hit is shaping up to be. So that's, it's kind of self-perpetuating that the more he's able to elevate and the more he's able to play his style of game, which I do think is like slugging and jogging versus trying to, hustle out infield singles, probably keeps him, more engaged, more part of the lineup. And then as you get towards June, July, if he's able to stay healthy and intact, then you get the kind of Dylan Cease motivation of, oh, maybe they'll trade me to a cool team and I'll keep going. So that's, I think, where he's at. And, there's the whole idea of the contract year when it comes to Jimenez and, whether that'll motivate him. And I think most players are self-motivated by just, how tough it is to remain in the big leagues, and they wouldn't be in the big leagues if they couldn't be motivated, through all the stuff they have to deal with climbing up the minor league ladder. But I think when you're at a point in his career where what he's been doing hasn't been working, both in terms of conditioning or durability and just the way he goes about trying to produce, it does create a situation of well, if I'm not in this team's long-term plans anymore, my life as a baseball player gets a lot harder. So, this is now the time to try what I've been loath to try to regain stability in my production and then in my career so I can continue being well paid and wanted by the team I'm currently employed by.
Let's move over to my crazy thought. And the more I watch Nicky Lopez, James, again, I don't know if I'm just being too optimistic about Nicky. One, I think he's going to be very popular. So when you're in the clubhouse, I'm always expecting a lot of recorders, a lot of microphones in front of Nicky Lopez, because he seems to be a quick media favorite right now. Especially for Chuck Garfien and John Schriffen. They mention all the time on just how happy and pleasant Nicky Lopez is in the clubhouse. But here's my crazy thought. We know Nicky Lopez can play defense. And with the second base situation for the White Sox, no one really challenging him, I think he's going to get a lot of starts. Offensively, he looks like he's willing to take the walk in spring training. So when you all add it up together, I got this feeling that Nicky Lopez could be a 2-WAR player in 2024. Is that too crazy of a thought?
What I mean, Pedro's challenging him to repeat his 6-WAR season. What are you talking about 2-WAR?
I don't know if I want to go to 6-WAR quite yet. I mean, that's all-star level. I don't want to put that pressure on Nicky Lopez and be like, yeah, he's going to repeat that 6-WAR season. Even though I did not know how sustainable that season was for Nicky Lopez. But, I mean, I guess if he has a 104 weighted runs created plus, he can get there. But the way that he's flashing the leather, and I think he's going to play 140 plus games if he's healthy for the White Sox. And if he walks at a 10% clip, I think it's possible that he can get to 2 WAR.
Yeah, I mean, sure, it could happen. Like, it probably takes some BABIP cooperation for sure, just because of the way his contact is. Like, it needs to fall in somewhere, and it's probably not going to be the seats. I found him to be like a normal person. Like, he wasn't like the most chipper, nicest person I've ever met, and he was like very cooperative. He was like a normal,
So
nice
you're
interview. I don't know,
already-
like it seems like a normal guy. Oh, good, cool.
James Vegan already countering his counterparts. Nicky's not that nice of a guy.
He seemed fine. I don't know. Like, we had no problems. He tolerated all my questions. He didn't get annoyed when I asked him like if he says that he's from Chicago or if he tells people he's from Naperville. And I thought he gave the right answer too. He says he tells people he's from a suburb right outside of Chicago. It takes him, like, his chase rate has never been, like you mentioned him taking a walk, like his chase rate's like a little better than average. It's never been about like unwillingness necessarily to take a walk. It's about, it's a power level where you're going to get challenged a little bit. When he had his big year, his contact rate is good. When he had his big, 2021 year where he had the 104 weighted run created plus, one, he had a 347 BABIP, but his contact was leaned a little bit more to like Nick Madrigal light, like it was really elite. He's going to turn 29 soon. Is that a little bit of that ebbing away, or is it an approach factor where you can get back to that? His chase was a little bit better that year. It was sub 30, whereas he's trended over 30 at times. It's not like eons away what he did last couple of years, to where at least he can provide the bones of a performance where maybe a normal BABIP like still provides like the 85 weighted runs created plus season, where along with defense and base running you can get there to 2 WAR. So yeah, I don't think it's crazy. I don't think it would be like, if it doesn't work out or if he like has a 55 WRC plus, we can't be like, I can't believe that happened, like, because there's obviously a track record of it. But I don't think 2 WAR is like, if things go right, this is what he delivers. I don't think it's crazy. It's just that might be like the probably reasonable optimistic ceiling, which is why this isn't like, the long-term fix necessarily, even though you got 2 more years of control. So obviously if it gives you a serviceable year, the system's not really in a way where he's going to get forced out with any quickness, barring a Jose Rodriguez turnaround. So yeah, I think that's not crazy. Maybe it's a little bit of, you are been exposed to this repeatedly and don't really feel like you have other choices. So you're trying to see an optimistic angle here, but that's not crazy. That's just being affected by your surroundings. So I want to shame you.
I'm looking at this
belief.
roster. I'm trying to find who the 2 WAR players are. Like Luis Robert, yes.
Look for the helpers.
Look for the helpers. Andrew Benintendi, Jim. I kind of want the White Sox to find like the RoboCop arm, or put a literal, like, remember the video game Metroid? Mm-hmm. Make Andrew Benintendi's left arm the Metroid cannon, that it just picks up the baseball off the ground and shoots it. I'm going to vent here. I cannot believe on a medium fly ball to left field that, yes, Shohei Ohtani is fast, tagged up from first and reached second before Benintendi's throw got to second base.
And Benintendi was ready for it.
I know.
Like, it wasn't like he was sleeping and just like caught the ball in a relaxed fashion and then rushed to throw over that was off target. Like, that was his best effort.
That might be a 30 grade arm in left field. Ugh. Anyway, so again, I'm trying to find the 2 WAR players. I don't know about Andrew Benintendi being 2 WAR. Yohan, if he's healthy, yeah, I think he can get there. And then that's about it.
I think like what Nicky Lopez, he was on a 2-win pace last year. Like, his playing times, slacked off when he was traded to Atlanta and was a utility infielder bench guy. The problem with like just extrapolating his numbers is that like once he went to Atlanta, his numbers rebounded, but also he played a lot less. So it's probably just Brian Snitker saying like, hey, this is a good time to play Nicky Lopez, and like him getting some, good opportunities and some better numbers versus being like the only option for the Royals middle infield. And that's when he had the 600 OPS. So I think if he's in that same situation where like he's just the guy, then it could be a case of like just overplaying him to where like maybe he gets off to a 2-win start, but then just like a month-long slump hits, and then just, it's kind of just a bench bat. But Yolmer Sanchez had 2-win seasons, like kind of like the Juan Pierre type 2-win seasons of just getting so many plate appearances and being okay with the, in Sanchez's case, good to great defense that he got there. So Lopez could be the same if BABIP's on his side. The one thing I wondered about with Lopez being like a media guy, in partially because of the Naperville thing, but also because Gavin Sheets got a lot of FaceTime, which I thought was odd given that like his production was, really awful in the second half and his spot doesn't seem secure. So it seems like they're looking for somebody who can speak for the team. Benintendi didn't seem like that guy because he just got here and he wasn't healthy. So he wasn't all, it's not like he was performing to his current levels and could really like take the rest of the roster to task. So I think they're looking for some guy to do that. Lopez had been that guy in the past for the Royals. And so I wonder if that's one of the reasons why he's getting this attention. Maybe James can speak to that, or maybe, I'm completely off base here and it's just more a matter of like, oh, it's a Naperville thing, novelty. It'll settle in.
Gavin Sheets has son of a big leaguer media polish. Like he knows, like if he hits a home run to be at his locker post game, he knows like he is very approachable. Like the offense stunk and you need to talk to one of the hitters to be like, hey, we stunk tonight. He will be available. Like he's just very like, he's both concise. Like he's not like someone who just like gabs off like off the cuff to the media, but like is very much like, I know what you need from this conversation. I will give it to you. And I know like how long it needs to be. And I will speak in like, a condensed take, like a message you can take away and like put down. Like that's where like his, I think son of a big leaguer experience like shows up. So yeah, I think we wind up like talking to those guys who like know how interviews work really well, a disproportionate amount of the time.
So it's kind of like on one end of the spectrum is Andrew Vaughn, who doesn't quite seem comfortable or like really know like how to speak in a kind of a more general way. Like it seems like he can speak technically, but not necessarily like capture the zeitgeist necessarily. Whereas like Adam Eaton was the off the cuff guy who could start talking and then not stop and like skid past the runway and crash into a ditch. Like he had trouble landing the plane.
Like, not that like I don't want to compare the two because obviously their dynamics are very different, but like I think Liam Hendricks was he's I think he said something recently about like other players thinking like he talked too much, and like Liam was like this kind of radical transparency type of guy, like that he felt that like talking openly had gotten him past like the mode he was in his career. So he was like very much like open book. You walk up to him and get like 15 minutes on the state of the team and state of him. Like media loved him, but he wasn't like this. It was like this open vein almost of just like you could talk to him and you get everything, but he wasn't like this classically like I know the media is going to be here and I'm going to be available. I'm going to speak in sound bites. I'm going to be done in 5 minutes and everyone's going to be happy. And the TV crews are going to go home happy because they got like the 2-sentence summary of the game and moved on. Andrew Vaughn is like hyper available, like hyper, like willing to talk to you whenever, but is going to be very reserved when he does. So like, he's very much like in a similar vein as Gavin, maybe not as like gregarious, but he's like, he'll talk after pretty much every game. He'll say like, hey, we need to hit better after any loss. And is like very nice guy to deal with, but doesn't necessarily like tell you his mechanics or like tell you like everything about like his hand placement. He's the sort of guy where I have to like have video and have deduce what he did and talk to scouts and be like, is this what you're working on? And be like, yes. Rather than him like, this is what I'm going to try to with my swing today. Wish me luck, guys. Like he's not that sort of dude.
When I've talked to Andrew, he seems very like he went to a D1 school and he took media classes. Like he's very prepared, very concise with his answers. Like if you need a 10-minute conversation with Andrew Vaughn, you better have like 20 to 25 questions to ask him because he's going to spit rapid fire responses back to you.
When I wrote the big like profile about him when he was like a rookie in spring, like we talked for like 15 minutes. I prepared like 30 questions. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Our last topic in this episode. So as many know, and James, you are new. So with our friends from the 108 with Beef Loaf, what I do stupidly every year, James, is I bet a steak dinner bet with Beef Loaf about the White Sox. And I'm on a 2-season losing streak. I thought Lance Lynn would bounce back. I thought Elvis Andrus would be a 100 weighted graded plus player. I can't say that with a straight face anymore because he wasn't even close and he didn't give me any hope whatsoever. So I've lost 2 steak dinner bets in a row. So what I proposed to him, not a marriage proposal, of course, but when I had the steak dinner bet a couple weeks ago, what I was pitching to him was instead of like win-loss, because he thinks the White Sox should win more than 68 games. And I don't want to go down that path because I don't want people to think I'm being overly negative about the 2024 White Sox. But since we're focusing so much on run prevention, or at least the White Sox are, I thought that would be a good steak dinner bet. Over under runs allowed for the season for the Chicago White Sox, something that we could be paying attention to all 162 games. So now you know the concept. And Jim, I know you've been laughing at me the last couple of years of these stupid steak dinner bets that I've been making, trying to instill hope when there probably wasn't any to begin with. What I need help with is setting that line of how many runs the White Sox will allow over under in 2024. So Jim, do you have a good recommendation of what the line should be?
Well, I do like the steak dinner bet concept, like more so than just like money, because like I used to have a bet with a Cubs fan friend every year based on something. And the bet was always concert ticket. Because like worst case scenario, lose the bet, like you go to a concert. You just, so you didn't feel bad about losing, just more something like it gives you an excuse to like arrange a show to, especially like since I'm coming into town, like make sure I see the guy. So, I always enjoyed that part of it. I think the steak dinner captures the same spirit. I think when it comes to like run prevention, I think like the Cease trade is going to be the one that kind of gums it up. Like it almost feels like you need like two numbers, like in the event like Dylan Cease is traded in May, versus like if he makes it the deadline, because I think you can pretty much not count on him being there in August, whether it's because he's not throwing or because he's traded, like one way or another. Like if he's healthy and throwing the ball anywhere like he should be, it doesn't seem like he'll be at the White Sox. So I think you have to plan for like the last 2 months being kind of gross, unless you get some surprising performances from like a Nastrini type. So my first like simple reductive thought was like, well, league average was 741, like 100 runs fewer than the White Sox allowed last year. So that seems like a good target. However, with the Cease thing looming over everything, I'm kind of thinking like 760 might be more closer to like a Vegas line of, versus like what the White Sox want to be versus like what it might realistically be a success versus what something the White Sox will actually be proud of and tout.
Okay, so it's like 759 and a half or 760 and a half.
That granular, like you call, you make the call. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to have to be that. These are $500 steak dinner bets, Jim. Okay. Beef loaf is not a cheap date. All right. We're not going to Steak and Egger. I'm getting him some eggs and a strip steak for $15. No, he's a bougie boy. So it does need to be that granular.
So that would be like a 4.69 ERA.
So let's say, I got one vote for 759 and a half. How about you, James? If you had to help me with the number, what would you set the number at?
I had a similar process. Well, one, I have an entirely unrelated tangent. Elvis Andrus had a 120 WRC plus in the second half of 2022. Yep. Is mad, like torrid second half that made him like Bibles as someone to bring back. Second half last year, he was a 117 WRC plus. The Pedro just giving him the playing time. I think you'd be having free steak this night. You got another.
So I need to blame Pedro Grifol.
Right.
Excellent. All right, it's Pedro's fault. I'll send him the receipt.
They haven't given up on the season for I don't know whatever reason, and just played Elvis down the stretch. But I looked at the league average too. That was my starting point, and the team that was right at it last year was the Detroit Tigers, who were at 740 runs. The Tigers, I don't know if pretty much like every starter got injured. Eduardo Rodriguez led them with 26 starts. They had 17 different guys make starts for them. They basically missed a half season of Skubal. Lorenzen was their all-star. He had a 3.58 ERA. maybe that wouldn't be an unreasonable thing for Cease to post this year. And he was traded at the deadline. They brought up like essentially all their AAA rotation at some point, and they're still able to, where this was their only strength, and they found some guys in the bullpen and became consistent, even suffered through a pretty awful like Alex Langley year in terms of control. And they were an average run prevention unit when that was like basically their only reason to exist. I think if the White Sox have that similar focus, I don't think the talent level is like too removed from what Detroit had to dive into without having Casey Mize or not having Manning or Skubal for half the season. I think 740, first of all, it's an appealingly round number, so that's probably a good way to go, but I don't think it's out of the realm if this is like what your entire team is built around and what your focus is.
I was thinking like 799.5 because going back to our conversation at the beginning of this podcast, I don't even know who's going to be part of the starting five for the White Sox. Like, they allowed 841 runs last year. Fangraphs is projecting the White Sox to be 68-94, but allowing 5.13 runs per game, that comes out to 831 runs allowed. So, like, considering that Cease could be traded and other things could happen, like, that's what I was adding on top of the league average, Jim, was not just a few runs, like over 50 runs I was adding to the total if they lose Cease and they get away from that type of pace.
Well, do you know what side of the line you're going to be on?
See, that's the other question. Like, I don't know. Yeah. Like, I'm leaving it to Beef because he's won the last two, so he can decide.
So it has to be fair. You can't skew it to like
in my advantage. No. Yeah. Like, so if I put it at 799.5 because he thinks the White Sox should win more than 68 games, that might be an easy under for him. But to like James's point, if we think the White Sox defense is going to improve that much, and if they're going to win 10 plus games in 2024, it's going to have to come on the run prevention side, and to go from 841 to 741, there's your 10 wins there by reducing 100. So I get that. It would make it tough. Like, do you think the White Sox would be better than league average or below league average on the run prevention side?
Yeah, it's hard for me to think they can get like Detroit good, just because the Tigers, they've been able to produce relievers. They have more stability, I think, on the pitching side than the White Sox have had, like both, like when it comes to like AJ Hinch being there the whole time and having some idea versus Grifol still trying to figure it out and know exactly like what his status in the organization is. Like, Hinch is locked in there. Almost seems like he's part of the front office at this point, whereas Grifol feels kind of vestigial almost. So that's why, like, I don't have high hopes on the White Sox being like able to like kill their Pythag, which I think is what it would be, what like having the kind of run prevention would require. Like, I don't think they're synced up that well to, beat those numbers. So that's why I think like 760 feels optimistic. But like, if Cease is there, if the defense is there the whole time, like, I could see 760 being like something they could beat. I think my concern and why I'm with you nudging that bar higher is like, if this plan of like defense centric with Maldonado, if he turns out to be like the worst catcher in baseball again and providing like like Houston masked all his problems by being good, and like moving to a bad team for the first time in like 5 years, 6 years, we realized like, he's, his aura is partially because like he was catching Justin Verlander and that helped. If Max Stassi, like if he can't get back to where he was 3 years ago, if DeYoung, shows why he was happy to have a job, if Lopez has, one of his like 60 WRC plus, like that's a whole lot of roster spots they might have to turn over to rookies who might have the same problem with speed of game type such. So like, I think there is a chance of like this roster going kerplunk and basically having to reset to where they were last year of just having a bunch of guys trying to keep their heads above water. So that's why, like, I think 740 almost feels like the best case scenario. And that's why I think, 790, like, I don't know if I'm trying to think like a fair over under, like, maybe like 790 90 would be a case of like, I could maybe bet either side. 799 feels like the under might be in play because last year was so spectacularly horrible. But yeah.
Yeah.
Probably in that. Yeah. I'm with you setting the bar higher.
Yeah. Like here's my luck. If we put it at 760.5, right? The White Sox would have allowed exactly 760 runs to the final game of the year in Detroit. And I'm rooting for Chris Flexen to throw a shutout. Like, that would be my luck if I had the under.
I believe in him.
I gotta believe. Like, Flex, man, I need you to have the game of your life. $500 stake dinner bet is riding on this game.
Or you just like sneak into the park and like set off the sprinkler system and flood the field. And all of a sudden, like, oh, the game's unplayable. The game has no postseason implications. The season's over. Would the fine offset the cost of the steak dinner?
Well, that happened in Vegas. The guys who went streaking during the Super Bowl placed a pretty significant bet that somebody would run on the field and streak. So their winnings were more than what they had to pay in their fine of going to jail for running onto the field. I don't know if sportsbooks should pay that.
That's the real reason players aren't allowed to bet on their own game.
Exactly.
They would all just strip naked immediately. They'd
just be wearing G-strings, just running all over the place. But yeah, this is where, again, a bougie steak dinner is on the line here, folks. So for those listening, if you want to chime in, what do you think a good over-under line would be for runs allowed in the season? We could use your help because we got to get that set in stone before the season starts. We'll probably talk about that in our live show at the Remova Theater on Wednesday night, March 27th. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. To give you a heads up, in the upcoming weeks, we're going to be doing more of the position previews. I know we've been speaking about individual players, but we'll do more in-depth conversations about where the positions break down right now as we get closer to the regular season. We'll also have our friends from the other teams in the American League Central, the Minnesota Twins, the Detroit Tigers, Cleveland Guardians, and Kansas City Royals. We'll have reporters and analysts join the show to give their thoughts on how the spring training is going for the AL Central rivals of the Chicago White Sox and what should we expect as opening day comes up. But again, the White Sox will be at home against the Detroit Tigers. But thank you so much for listening to this podcast episode, and you can subscribe to the Sox Machine podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music, as long as they are playing nice and not fighting with one another. You can also watch our videos at youtube.com/Sox Machine and follow us on social media. We're on all the platforms at Sox Machine. You can follow James Fegan at JR Fegan, and you can follow me at Sox Machine_Josh. To our existing Patreon supporters, thank you guys so much for your continued and new support to Sox Machine. Greatly appreciated. Again, a lot of the content coming up, full access to everything that we do at Sox Machine, just $5 a month. That's the beginning tier. We also have other tiers of support as well, $10, $25, and of course our Veterans Committee give you additional benefits. So if you enjoy our work and you want full access and you want more, you can get more by going to patreon.com/Sox Machine to sign up, and you save with an annual subscription. What a great time to sign up for an annual subscription as opening day nears. The Sox Machine podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com. You're on for all things Chicago White Sox baseball and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis and James Fegan, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.
Everybody in your crew identifies as either Big Mac Burger, McNuggets, or McCrispy Sandwich. But you're the Filet-O-Fish Sandwich all day. That crispy fish, that savory tartar sauce, that melty cheese, that pillowy bun. Yeah, you get it. Every time.
And if you love the Filet-O-Fish, right now you can catch two of the classics you love for just $6. Limited time only. Price and participation may vary. Cannot be combined with any other offer. Single item at regular price.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.